All right. I think we need to come together to establish some sentiments that the division community has had for a little bit. Some are still in the disagreement region because it appears that this reality might not necessarily be the most favorable. Now, I've always maintained the fact that Tom Clancy's The Division 2 is a very PvE centric game because when you look down the line, you'll see that a lot of the support have been PvE centered. Now, at first, this seemed like it was a huge bone of contention. A lot of folk in the PvP community, they see it as well. You're supposed to be able to graduate to this end game called the PvP after farming gear, and then that's basically what the game does, in that regard. But that's not really been the case because the developers have dropped a lot of end game PvE content like the raids, the summit, what's the name of the other one? I can't even remember the name of the other one that everybody runs into in the map and starts to jump all over the place. But not until the Division Heartland actually showed up. So in your startup screen, you're going to see their news scrolling on the left-hand side, and you see Heartland as one of the, things that they want to update you on that you can pretty much go into. So this is pretty much, in my opinion, what I think is going to be or have a little bit more of the PvP focus, not necessarily just because they want to move away from, the Division 2, but because it will be much more streamlined to balance the Division Heartland around a PvP centric perspective. This is what I think right now is kind of balancing the entire conversation. So the sentiment that Heartland is probably going to be for PvP is one that we can establish that is a proper, perspective. Like, how do we look at Division Heartland? Well, a PvP centered or looking like it's going to be a more PvP centered, game because free to play, cross play, all those things just seem to continue to lean towards that direction. Now, when you look at the Division 2, nonetheless, I look at the Dark Zone and I'm like, man, they have pretty much, in a sense, a countdown. That was the mode I forgot. They have, in a sense, kind of, not necessarily done too much to change the PvP in this game. Yes, there are PvP modes that you can play, real quick short bursts and all of those stuff. But how do we know that we're not going to see similar PvP modes actually show up when Heartland releases? Which brings me to my topic of conversation that is linked to this, which is it will probably not be, too far to say, what if we got some new maps in the game? Now, the new maps and modes that people are requesting, we're more than likely going to be seeing new modes pretty soon with the incursions coming. To me, that is something that I've always said that the Division needed to have. The incursion modes have always been really, really solid. There's no doubt that, these modes are able to pretty much bring a fresh look at the way we've looked at, say, different aspects of the game. Because the incursion modes from the Division 1, they were kind of like mini raids with small mechanics, but they had an aspect to them that provided different challenges that had some RNG elements, somewhat attached to them. Example, if you think about, say, the Falcon Lost incursion, and I might be speaking Greek to some of you who didn't play Division 1. Sorry about that, but that's just pretty much the way things are. The Falcon Lost incursion really did go ahead to, provide a very straightforward baseline, framework for making these so-called incursions. You just had a very simple mechanic. 4 people could jump in, 4 people could play, 4 people could pretty much go ahead and accomplish this entire task, or maybe less than 4, depending on how skilled they were. And it was tuned very well. It had waves of enemies depending on which incursion you were playing and how you actually decided to go about it. Like if you were playing Clear Sky, you could pretty much that incursion was interesting. I really enjoyed that incursion. You could pretty much beat that incursion in like 7-8 minutes because everybody kind of understood how to pretty much go about things. So with the new incursions coming out and with the new mode that's also going to be coming out, the roguelike, the roguelike, I think these, in my opinion, continue to stress that reality. The Division 2 has always been a PvE-centric game, or maybe the devs wanted a PvP/PvE-centric game, but over time, as they started to see, well, this is probably where our audience is leaning, they decided to continue that support. Another thing that I usually always cite, and I know this is something that maybe most may not agree, is the financial incentivizing, I would say pillars that the Division's PvE side holds, and it holds it as an advantage over the PvP. What I mean by that is it seems like it's easier to monetize the PvE side of the Division 2 versus the PvP side. And you got to understand what I mean. So when you think about, say, the way the division has kind of progressed, and we can go into the progression and we can go into the, the apparel store and all of this stuff, it seems like a lot of the apparel and a lot of the different seasons and the things that usually go into in-game economy have been leaning more and more towards the PvE side. In fact, the Dark Zone in the Division 2, many of you may remember, had a DZ vendor, a vendor that was actually inside of the Dark Zone. And that DZ vendor was eventually moved to outside of the DZ. But that DZ vendor used to have some really cool stuff. But now you can actually get some of those cool stuff from playing the seasons and getting them from season caches. So these things have been leaning towards that. And I think the developers eventually embraced that reality. They eventually got to the point where they're like, you know what? Why don't we just go ahead and just do this? Why don't we just go ahead and just make the PvE side, or a lot of what we bring out, PvE centric, and then they will have a little bit of a PvP application, because the Dark Zone is not too attractive as a concept in this game. I don't know why. I don't know what happened to, the Dark Zone. I guess I could tell you the atmosphere and the way it was designed changed. Bringing 3 Dark Zones, possibly for technical reasons, possible for design reasons, possibly just because they didn't want to deal with it the way they had to deal with all the updates and everything in Division 1. Maybe, I don't know. But that probably did not really bode well. For instance, if they had made, say, the White House, just a little bit north of the White House or south of the White House, kind of a Dark Zone area, that to me would have been a design decision that would lure players into it. Having to put the Dark Zones on 3 different ends of the map just makes it seem like it's out of the way. There's nothing really interesting about that. Like, example, if you look at the Division 1's map, the Dark Zone is smack dab in the center of their Manhattan reiteration, and there are missions all around it, there are PvE items all around it. But if you look very closely at the Division 2, the PvE activities around the Dark Zone are quite scarce. This shows a very intent design to kind of make the Dark Zone and the PvP aspects kind of secondary in the game. You can tell from, these little things that the developers actually put out. And those are your cues to kind of tell you, like, okay, it appears that, there really isn't much of a desire from these devs to actually have, the PvP have a huge focus in the Division 2. I think now we can make this argument comfortably. I used to get a lot of pushback back in the day for it, but seeing that more and more people are asking for more modes and different maps, and the developers are delivering it, whereas on the PvP side, a lot of the changes have been much slower. I know there have been logistical concerns, but you can look at priority too. Like, yes, there are not enough developers to make the game and so on and so forth. There are these issues. But then how about, the fact that even though there are not enough developers to make these, changes in the Dark Zone, we're still going ahead to nonetheless see, the PvE side get the priority over and over again over the PvP side. I guess this can kind of maybe spell exactly what it is that, the developers seem to prioritize overall. It could be for profits. Maybe the PvP side, like I said, have always brought in the dollars, and, it's always going to look like that over time. But these are my thoughts nonetheless. I just thought I'd go ahead and talk about them in a video. I saw some comments from our audiences, talking about the fact that we don't necessarily have new maps just yet. And I thought it was interesting to bring up this point. Possibly these are the reasons, that we have to consider. Thanks for watching the video. Let me hear your thoughts in the comment section. Hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.